Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is episode 3 of the Counterculture podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Lujan, and today is September 12th, 2016, and I am bringing you today's most important headlines, the headlines that are getting filtered, getting omitted, and getting spun. I'm bringing them to you raw, and I'm bringing them to you in truth. Thank you for joining me today. This is my third episode. If you paid any attention, episode 2 or 1, that was a week ago, or actually over a week ago. I was on a well-enjoyed vacation and just thought, wow, maybe I just committed a bunch of copyright infringements by using Zed's Dead Collapse featuring Memorex song. That song is really awesome. So I guess I'll find out, haven't read the terms and conditions of YouTube. So as promised, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the news today. Biggest news probably in the entire political season since Donald Trump announced his candidacy for president. Hillary Clinton collapses on video yesterday, September 10th, at a New York City 9/11 memorial event. Many of you have heard of it. Many of you have seen the video. All I wanted to say is it's no longer a theory. She is a very sick woman, and the campaign has been caught lying. Initially, the campaign told us that she was experiencing overheating. Hours later, we were told it was pneumonia, which explained the coughing fit. And then it was, no, the coughing is just from allergies. And then now they're admitting to pneumonia. So you can't have it both ways. The campaign got caught lying. She's on video collapsing. Allegedly, what I saw this morning is a piece of metal fell from underneath her pantsuit onto the ground. Many are speculating what that could be, which leads me to my next headline. This is from Infowars.com. DNC to hold emergency meeting to consider replacing Hillary Clinton. Now, this is coming from a tweet from Emmy Award-winning broadcaster David Shuster, who is confirming with Democratic Party operatives that the Democratic National Committee is seriously considering a replacement or how to move forward with the Hillary Clinton health situation. And it's kind of a bad timing because if you remember last week, she said in a speech that half of Donald Trump supporters were deplorables. And that got her a lot of heat that she normally doesn't get from the media. And now that her illness is getting exposed, this is truly what many are calling uncharted political territory. So my only thought on this is it really doesn't matter who gets in. Obviously, Hillary Clinton has sort of been the face, the figurehead of the tyranny and of the corruption. But when you understand that this is a multi-billion-dollar, 100-year plan system in place that puts presidents into power via the Council on Foreign Relations, via Bilderberg, via all these different groups and special interests and billions of dollars in insider trading and foreign governments. If you haven't noticed, America, you're not in control of the election. So if you're not in control of the election, it really doesn't matter if Hillary takes a fall because the machine will continue to roll. Which brings me to my next article, which is out of The Hill. And this is titled Tim Kaine's Radical Roots. Tim Kaine, the vice presidential nominee for president on the Hillary Clinton ticket, is been reported, according to the media, that he took a life-transforming, quote, missions trip to Latin America in 1980, where there he was mentored by Marxists, communists, in the 1980s and embraced what is known as liberation theology. Liberation theology, really briefly, is a product of the Kremlin, a product of the communist Soviet Union, which many historians and analysts will agree was a communist effort to bring Catholic and Latin American countries under Soviet influence. Hold up. Excuse me. I don't have time to edit. I don't have a producer. So, interestingly, we have a man who's running for vice president on a ticket with an elderly woman who's literally collapsing and dying in front of our eyes. embracing communism. Obviously, that's a very crazy thought considering that we're in a free republic, a constitutional republic, and many don't give thought to communism anymore. But just the fact that we have a leading vice presidential candidate who could very well become the next president was running around in the 80s with communists embracing political philosophies and beliefs that run counter and actually are in opposition to our system of government here in the United States. Absolutely, we live in amazing times. Which leads me to my next headline, SputnikNews.com, Google Clinton manipulation elections. And this is very interesting because this is actually what I do for a living. I resell Google services. I resell Google marketing. And I have the opportunity to understand a little bit about how Google works, how their algorithm works, and just on the technological side of things. And this article was especially fascinating to me because it's the intersection of technology and politics, and speaks to a broader notion of how influential and how important and how central technology has become in our political process, and especially this campaign. The article reports on research psychologist Robert Epstein, who became famous via SourceFed on a video that has been viewed over millions of times, more than 1 million times. The 3-minute version on Facebook, 25 million times, essentially showing that the autocomplete feature on Google does not report any negative suggestions on Hillary Clinton, and estimates that alone could sway 3 million votes in a general election. So screen print after screen print. And let me back up. Autocomplete is when you go to Google. Many of you probably use this on a daily basis where you're going to type in what is pneumonia. And as you're typing in what is PN, all of a sudden it completes the word for you. So that's the autocomplete feature. When you type in Hillary Clinton or any context of Hillary Clinton, this research shows that she's not getting any critical auto suggestion when compared to Bing and Yahoo, which actually do. And when you consider how much of the news media is negative on Hillary Clinton, especially in the blogosphere, there's a significant amount of distrust, yet Google doesn't calculate that into their algorithm. Google has denied everything. 1984 much. Next article is coming out of the Activist Post, one of my favorite websites because this is an open source journalism at its finest. You can report news, and the free market, based on your trustworthiness, credibility, and sources, will determine whether you have a good article or not. ActivistPost.com, interrupt your regularly scheduled program. Title of this article, Today, 15 years later, Physics Journal concludes all 3 World Trade Center towers collapsed due to controlled demolition. I have not forgotten yesterday was September 11th. 2016, 15 years ago, we witnessed the worst attack on the history of our country, the worst crime, I should say, ever committed on U.S. soil. We apparently don't have a suspect. He was killed by the name of Osama bin Laden. It came out a few weeks ago that Saudi Arabia was held responsible due to the new 9/11 Commission report. But we're here not holding anybody accountable or looking at the investigation or discussing it. But this article, a day after the 15-year anniversary of September 11th, is very appropriate in this podcast because it illustrates something that people have been talking about for many years. Europhysics News, a highly respected Europhysics magazine, claims, and I will quote, "The evidence points overwhelmingly to the conclusion that all 3 buildings were destroyed by controlled demolition." End quote. Close quote. Given the far-reaching implications, it is morally imperative that the hypothesis be the subject of a truly scientific and impartial investigation by responsible authorities. End quote. The 4 physicists conclude in the damning report. This is not conspiracy theorists running around in tinfoil hats. This is not the reptilians are taking over the world. This is not from the dark corners of the internets and the interwebs. This is coming from physicists who are trained to study the temperature of jet fuel and how it would affect the melting of steel. These are people who study the speed of free fall. These are people who know a lot about a subject that I know very little about, other than what I do know is that physics is a law like gravity. Whether you deny that it exists or you accept the fact that it exists, it's still a law, and it still maintains its authority because, like all natural laws, you can't go around it. And no amount of politics, no amount of media propaganda can dispute the fact that this report, this research paper by a group of highly trained physicians from Brigham University, McMaster University, a mechanical design engineer from the aerospace industry, have all concluded that the collapse of the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001 is consistent with a controlled demolition. Don't you think? But because it's damning evidence, because it's scientific, because it cannot be spun, we will not hear about this in the Pentagon-controlled corporate mainstream media. Jill Stein has also, the far left presidential candidate for the Green Party, has recently called for a new investigation. Next article is actually a blog post from former Congressman from Texas, Ron Paul, the Ron Paul Institute. Ron Paul still doing his thing. Ron Paul still fighting for liberty way out in 2016. Excuse me, he's been doing this since I was in diapers, and before that, before I was even born, he was checking Congress. And this blog is covering a recent address at Jackson Hole Monetary Policy Conference where Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen suggested that the Federal Reserve would raise interest rates by the end of the year, and that they are planning on increasing their inflation target, or the number that they want the level of inflation to be in the United States. And in layman's terms, many of you know this, inflation is really the cost of goods and services relative to the value of money. So if I were able to buy a hamburger in the 1950s for 50 cents, today it's $5, not because a hamburger became more valuable, but simply because my money is worth less than what it was in the 1950s. And the Federal Reserve is saying, let us go ahead and increase the worthlessness of the money that's being held in the bank accounts of American citizens. And this is interesting, and the reason I think why Ron Paul wrote about this is we just spent the last 8 years from the last financial crisis of 2008 of what they called quantitative easing, which is basically printing money out of thin air and dumping it into the system, and then historically low interest rates for all these years is suggesting that it's not really helping the economy. Everything that the Fed suggested they would do in 2008 has proven itself by the fruits that it did not bear, that it did not work. And Ron Paul is warning us, and he's been right many times before, that we're headed towards a financial crisis. It's going to be major. And with quantitative easing, with the printing of billions and trillions of dollars, and with the printing of, with the artificially low interest rates not being enough, Janet Yellen over the weekend suggested that we'll just make the money worth less. And Ron Paul's warning this will be a collapse of the welfare state, which is troubling for you and I, regular, everyday American citizens who are not dirt poor and who are not part of the elite, because we're stuck in the middle. We're going to have a warfare state that is going to collapse, and they can act very crazy in terms of taking more liberties, starting more wars, as most empires do at the end of their lifespan. And it's also especially troubling for the welfare state, because people who are dependent on the state for an income will not get that EBT on the 1st and 15th. And if anyone like me has ever lived in LA, and if the Lakers win or the Lakers lose and they'll go ahead and burn cars and blow up stuff and beat up people, imagine what they will do when those EBT payments don't come in on the 1st and 15th, big boy. Next article, Economic Collapse blog. Tent cities full of homeless people are booming in cities all over America as poverty spikes. The Economic Collapse blog, Michael Snyder, shout out to that dude. He is awesome. And the reason he's awesome is because he's chronicling the collapse of our once great republic by documenting everything that's going on with links. And one of the links that he links us to is from Poverty USA that says a total of 1.6 million children slept either in a homeless shelter or in some other form of emergency housing at some point last year. And the number that's being reported for homeless children in America has risen 60%. Homeless children up 60%. Since when? Way back in the old days when they had color TVs in 2008, the last recession. So in the last 8 years, in the last 8 years, we've seen an incredible increase in homeless children. That should be concerning to anyone, especially if you have children. The Department of Housing and Urban Development is saying 500,000 in the United States of the Americas are homeless, and 1.6 million children, as I mentioned, are sleeping in some sort of shelter. And then Michael Snyder, an Economic Collapse blog, in this article links to all these tent cities that have become so well known and so established. They even have names: Camp Hope in Las Cruces, Dignity Village in Portland, Oregon, Opportunity Village in Eugene, Oregon, The Right to Dream 2 in Portland, Oregon, The Jungle in San Jose. These sound like a bunch of movies or something, but it's really sad because it's a bunch of individuals and families living out in the middle of nowhere in a country that's supposedly the wealthiest country in the world. And he also talks in this article that the LA City Council, homelessness is so bad in my former city, that they've asked Governor Jerry Brown for a state of emergency. And Portland actually has extended their homeless emergency for another year. You guys, this is September 12th, 2016. Things don't seem to be getting better, do they? I remember Obama promising a lot. But here we are. And we have someone just like him, similar, promising the same things. Will you believe her? Will you believe him? Next article, cnsnews.com. 15% over target. 11,491 Syrian refugees admitted already. 0.46% are Christians. So Obama set a goal recently of admitting 10,000 people, political refugees, from the crisis in Syria this year, and he's already exceeded it. And what's interesting is that the 1951 Refugee Convention established that the persecution that would be required to qualify for refugee status, one of those grounds, one of those 5 criterias is religion. And if you have been observing the crisis in the Middle East, ISIS and some of these radical jihadi groups like al-Nusra and al-Qaeda and all these different groups are specifically targeting Christians. Now, they are targeting other Muslim groups. They are targeting homosexuals. However, it seems to be that their target of choice, the big enchilada, are the people who follow Jesus Christ. And these are the people who are getting their heads cut off, who are getting murdered, raped, tortured, etc. Christians are the persecuted group, especially in the Middle East. However, 0.46% of those 11,491 refugees are Christian. Interesting. Very interesting. And what's also interesting is that it's arguable that we created the crisis and now we're absorbing the refugees, and there's questions on the vetting process of the refugees and who's coming. What would stop a military-aged man who's been radicalized by a Muslim imam to come into the United States and say, I'm a refugee? Nothing. Nothing's going to stop that from happening, which leads me to a fascinating article that's just as related from a site called lifezet.com. Been hearing a lot about LifeZet. Got to look into these guys. They've been coming out with some really good stuff. Exclusive middle-aged America hit with staggering immigration surge. A DC-based Center for Immigration Studies draws on U.S. Census data. 1 in 3 Americans live in a county where 20% of adults are foreign-born. 1 in 3 Americans live in a county. So 33% of Americans live somewhere where 20% were never even born in the United States. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but what's interesting is that when you compare that to the 1990 numbers, there were 40 counties where immigrants made up at least 20% of the adult population, jumped from 44 in 1990 to 152 in 2014. Since 1990, immigration has quadrupled in 232 counties. So, yes, we are a nation of immigrants. Yes, we are a nation that's predisposed to bringing those marginalized groups and giving them an opportunity. But we must take pause at the acceleration, the reasoning, and the nations in which these people are coming from. And what I mean by that is if we have people coming from countries that are sponsoring terror, and we're primarily bringing in military-aged men, and we're bringing in people who have pledged allegiance to the destruction of our republic in the name of Islam and jihad, and if we're bringing those people in at levels unprecedented, at accelerated levels where we're overwhelming counties and public services, is it still a good idea? I think you can have too much of a good thing. I think water's good, but we shouldn't be drinking out of the fire hose. Which reminds me, let me take a drink of water real quick. Sorry guys, I got a lot of sleep last night and I'm fired up this morning. I haven't podcasted. I'm watching things happen in this world and I'm just like fired up right now. So bear with me. County Commissioner of Randolph County, North Carolina said, quote, "We're not prepared for them. We're being overrun by it." So it's a strain on social services that already have limited budgets. As the economy goes deeper into a collapse, as we acknowledged a moment ago in the Federal Reserve report, less money for schools, less money for hospital medical services in the counties where these immigrants depend on. And now our citizens, along with the immigrants, will suffer and go without. Last article of the day is coming out of The Sun from the UK on the other side of the pond. This article says, Minority Crime Reports, cops using artificial intelligence to stop crimes before they happen, researchers warn. So I don't know if anyone has ever seen the movie Minority Report. I have not. I want to see it now. But essentially it's a sci-fi nightmare of a dystopian future where the all-seeing eye, the state, is watching every move and has their thumb on society, and there's absolutely no liberty in the name of security and safety. Stanford University released a research study titled Artificial Intelligence and Life in 2030, saying that in 15 years, it'll be commonplace to have, quote, and I'm quoting Stanford University in real life, 2016, not Hollywood, not Minority Report, real life, guys, predictive policing, machine learning. Stanford University is saying that we will have computers like we have similar systems now that will be able to predict, as they claim, allegedly predict crimes before they happen, which sets a very dangerous precedent. One, what happened to innocent until proven guilty? Two, what happened to privacy? And because it would require an overbearing and pervasive society where everything is monitored, everything's looked, and of course everything's already recorded and looked now. But can you imagine when people start responding? I mean, I walk through the city every day. I'm on highways, I'm on streets, I walk into businesses, and I know I'm being recorded. I'm being recorded in closed caption. I'm being recorded from people's cell phones. I'm being recorded on security cameras at the store. I'm being recorded on state cameras on the highways. We're recorded all the time. But what's going to get freaky is when they can actually have a cop come up to you and say, hey, I think you were about to do something. Maybe you shouldn't do it. And that is the news for September 12th, 2016. I know I promised you guys an analysis and kind of go into one particular issue and focus in and hone in on one particular topic. But today I'm not going to do that because I ran out of time. I got a real job and I got to make money in this inflation-based fiat currency economy that we live in, don't we? Thank you for joining me. Thank you for listening to Counterculture. And remember, you can follow everything at aaronlujan.com. Two quick announcements. I just want to remind people I have a video report that I released last week that's already gotten a little bit of traction. It's titled Africans Immigrating to the U.S. through Mexico. I was in Tijuana about a week ago and saw hundreds, I would say, let's be conservative, dozens. I want to be conservative. Let's say dozens of clearly African men, primarily some women, standing in the middle of the streets of Tijuana, just waiting around doing nothing. And I had read a Judicial Watch report a couple of days before driving through TJ where they had announced that the Obama administration was working with foreign governments, specifically the Mexican government, Central American governments, to bring people from the Congo, from Somalia, from Pakistan and other areas, but primarily from Africa, through the Tijuana, San Diego, San Ysidro border crossing. And I interviewed one of them. That video's on my YouTube channel. And also, I am now on Stitcher. So if you're a Stitcher person, if you listen to your podcast on Stitcher, Counterculture is now available on Stitcher. Thank you to the Stitcher people for allowing me to have my podcast there. And of course, you can find it on SoundCloud.com. Thank you very much for joining me. Take care and bless you.